On the streets in Delhi 30 years ago, some guy just came and just put his hand on my chest. And my mom said, ignore it, don't make a scene. Today, we would never say that. We'd say, no,
Family support is very, very important. Whether it's your parents, your in-laws.
The want and the greed for the social currency of likes and followers turns you into someone that you don't want to be. It says you don't need to unscrew anybody else's light bulb to shine. And I think that's so brilliant.
When I invest in a women-led startup, the first thing I look for is
The same things that I would look for in a startup which is led by a man.
I think if we lived in a world where men were the ones who got pregnant and had kids, I'm sure we would have a solution by now.
Malini and Ratna, welcome to the Naari network, and it's absolutely wonderful to have both of you over here today. But before I get down to business, I was wondering, in 30 seconds, could both of you introduce yourselves with something that a Google search will never tell me about you? Do you want to go first?
Sure. So I think, my life, I pretty much live my life online. So there's very little that you don't find about me online. But I think the one thing that Google search won't tell you is that I'm actually a really massive pool shark. I play pool, and I actually paid my rent by betting on pool games at a little bar called The Ghetto when I first moved to Bombay. And I'm also a very massive game master. So I like to plan a lot of game nights when I'm not working.
Oh, nice. That must be a lot of fun
Yes.
at home.
Yeah.
And what about you?
So apart from the journey in the financial services space and now investing for 2 decades, I think one interesting thing about me is I love to paint. I love to sketch as well. And I am a travel buff. So a lot of times, especially when I have my me time during traveling or when I'm traveling alone, I do just sit and paint or sketch related to my surroundings.
So, Malini, when you started off,
Yeah.
did you ever imagine that what would start off as a radio jockey, a journey of a radio jockey and a personal blog will ultimately turn into such a big industry platform, an entertainment platform?
Honestly, I would never have predicted this, because when I started my career 15 years ago as a hobby blogger, this world didn't exist. There was no world, there was no influencer marketing, there was no industry at all. I was the first one doing it. So it was kind of intimidating and scary at the time, because I was like, if nobody's doing it, then I must be doing something wrong. That's how people tend to think.
Yeah.
But over the years, we've seen the evolution with the foray of social media and, the internet penetration into small cities as well. It's now become a full-fledged industry. And if somebody comes up to you and says that they know they're a social media influencer today, everybody understands what that means. So I'm kind of happy to have, played some role in, paving the path. But if you ask me if I saw it coming, absolutely not. But in hindsight, it all kind of falls into place and makes sense that it turned out this way.
And also for you, you've had a very long career within the space of finance, and you've moved in that space, and now here you are ultimately as a venture capitalist. And what was that shift like for you, where you suddenly said, okay, now this is the space that I'm going to be in?
To be very honest, you don't really foresee what you're going to do like a decade after where you are. So when I literally started venture capital or private equity, there wasn't a very full-blown industry as such. People didn't understand it, right? Venture capital has bust a lot in the last 5 years. So to be very honest, I started with consulting. I went on to doing investment banking at JP Morgan, which was more deals. And then from there, when the industry started, bubbling, a lot of funds started coming. That's when you move from the sell side to the buy side. And then, slowly the journey went on. So every stage was very interesting. Every stage was quite different as well, right? So when you move at that point in time, like colleagues and family used to be like, why? Which firm is this? What are they doing? In fact, the joke in my house used to be that they never really understood what I did. So it was the easiest to tell a lot of people that I am with the bank.
Did you face that as well? sometimes it's so difficult when there is a career and a profession that is so new, and then our moms or our dads get asked that question where they're like, oh, what does your daughter do? And there's something in the media, like you just said, something in banking. Did you face
Mine was even more hilarious because for the longest time, and everyone, and especially in India, most people feel that if you spend so much time on your phone, you're wasting your life, right? So it's like, phone pay must be playing some game. But my mom took it to the next level because she used to tell everyone that my daughter is an internet blocker when I was a blogger. Her logic was that, as lay people, we get so much spam. And Malini works with celebrities, so she blocks their spam. So she thought I was just sitting there. It was really cute, actually. She's 85 now, so bless her. Now she's on Facebook, and she's like my biggest supporter. But I think the big the shift that happened is that so many careers have now come to fruition that didn't exist, and that's going to be for Gen Alpha too. There's going to be so many careers tomorrow that don't yet have existence. Whether you're going to be like an usher on Elon Musk's ride to outer space or whatever it's going to be. So social media is one of those things. So it definitely was one of those, it was hard to explain what I do. I think for me it was because I was a radio jockey and I wrote the hobby blog as a side. It was kind of an extension to what was my gossip column 17 years ago in the midday, which was called Malini's Mumbai. So I would always explain to people I used to have a print column, but there isn't enough space in the newspaper to say all the things I want to say. So now I've put it on the web.
along the journey as well? Somewhere along, I also feel that both of you started off, is it fair for me to say, in a very male dominated space? Because at that time also, looking at just media houses,
Sure.
or people that were covering, we had just page 3.
Yeah. I mean, definitely, I think the large conglomerates in media were owned by, I guess, primarily men or big media houses, if as you say. But I think I had a very different experience. People always ask me this question about a male-dominated industry. I actually had the opposite experience. I feel that being a woman was to my advantage, and being a young woman with my, and this is before smartphones, so I would have my, very basic like Nokia phone, a camera, and a laptop, and I would go to the events and be with this little digital camera taking pictures where there would be a host of guys like pushing and shoving with their big cameras.
Yeah.
So being a woman in that environment actually made it easier for me because they'd be like, okay, beta, go in front. Like, okay, she's a girl, let her. So it worked to my advantage, frankly speaking. And that's kind of unusual. I think I only faced that male dominated or that pushback much later in my career, in my 40s, when I was in boardrooms is probably where I faced the conversation about key man insurance or do you plan to have kids and are you going to be serious about your career if you do?
If you
So
do.
it was the irony of that, yeah.
Yeah. And what about you, Ratna?
So essentially, financial services is a big boys' club, right? More so in investment banking and private equity. But what really helps is that you do put your head down, do what you're doing, right? Most important is you have to find good mentors and you have to make good friends. So if you're always like, I am being compromised or stuff like that, you keep thinking about that, it doesn't work. You just have to go there and do it. And if you have people who are your friends and mentors, it doesn't make so much of a difference. Where it does make a difference is your growth path, right? Essentially. What also happens is today also in financial services, like in media, there'll be 50-50 or 60-40 in terms of at the entry level. But as you go up the pyramid, it just keeps dropping and dropping and dropping because the journey becomes difficult. And especially the same thing, when you get married, when you're having kids, people don't take you seriously, even in your own organization. But then when you stay at it, it changes slowly. Right? The most important thing or the most difficult thing is not your own circle. Like our job is to go meet a lot of entrepreneurs, understand their businesses. It's like crisscrossing the country from manufacturing to warehouses to, IT companies. They don't take you seriously, right? When they are talking to you in a boardroom, they will be like, they're talking to a woman. A lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of old age promoters won't even open up to you in terms of discussions.
The other thing I think now that you mentioned this, I thought was interesting is when I was going out and raising funding or looking for people to like invest in me, there were so few women, like especially 15 years ago, who are, VCs. And I think that was also where I find there aren't enough women at the top of the food chain that are investing in women-led businesses. So I think that's where I also saw the big discrepancy.
In fact, I looked it up and it actually says that in the past 30 years, all women teams have only secured only 2.4% of VC funding. Would you agree with that?
It's less than 5%. It's a known fact. But you know what also happens is one perception about a lot of women businesses, which as they grow, everybody starts off well, right? But as they grow is assumed to be a lifestyle business. So people will assume that if it's consumer, it's fashion, people will still invest. But if it is something a little more technical, they don't have that confidence that this will grow beyond a certain point. I think that mindset is changing now. As we're seeing a lot of startups, a lot of unicorns having women founders, the only way to change mindset is to have examples.
It's actually quite fashionable to be a woman founder now. It adds a little something, I feel.
It does, because statistically also what it does show is that in the younger age group of 18 to 34, they're almost seeing in that category, it's 54% of female entrepreneurs belong just to that category, because there are many younger kids and millennials that are out
I also
there.
think there's a lot of women who've come back. And I noticed this during the pandemic. A lot of people started businesses at home. A lot of women were doing like their home bakeries and, candles or whatever, like small homegrown businesses that were entering the workforce because suddenly they were able to juggle both. So.
And I want to also go back a little bit to, how both of you were just talking about being friends and being mentors. And how do you, I again think there's like a very fine line over there for the only reason that, at the end of the day, it's still a boss and an employee relationship. We're friends, of course we are, but there is like a certain line that one can't cross. And this is for young women entrepreneurs that are watching right now. How would you advise them to maintain that balance?
I mean, I think in my industry, it's so different, to be honest. I think it's because in the media industry, it's also because our work and life overlap so much, right? So it's kind of hard to, but I think it's a matter of mutual respect. And for me, I will give a lot of leeway and a lot of freedom to my team to function as they want. It's not like you have to be at work at like 9:55 or because there's no clock in, clock out. We work weekends, we do whatever. But I never refuse anyone who wants to go for a friend's wedding or something because I know how important that growth is as well. But my understanding with them is if you respect me and what I want from you, I will respect you and your time and we can have fun together. But, know that you can't like BS me, So, because we've all done it. And I have funny examples of this, right? When you have like kids are like, I can't come to work because I'm really unwell today. And then they check in on Foursquare. They can't resist the urge to post something on Instagram, So I think it's one of those things where it's not even so much about a line of like, don't cross this line. I think it's a matter of maintaining that respect. But it also, and I've learned this the hard way also, is that as a manager, you need to be able to do or know exactly what it takes to do everybody's job to the lowest rung of the ladder. So you know when they're not doing enough or when they need to step up or when you're giving them too much to do. Because I've also been, we've all been there where there's one person who's carrying the load and they're getting so much more to do and they're just happy to. And I've had that experience when I worked in radio. I didn't realize that all the other hosts, primarily guys, were getting raises. And I just never thought to ask for it. I thought when I'll get a raise when I'm supposed to get a raise. And then I found out. And then I went and asked for it. And yes, of course, they gave it to me. And then that's where you realize is you also have to be aware that you have to, teach people to ask for what they deserve.
Absolutely. What do you think, Ratna? How does one maintain that?
I think mentors, the best mentors are ones who are not your immediate boss. Having said, because that gives a different perspective, a different lens, because somebody's seeing it from outside. When you're not too married to it, you're able to give the right guidance and you're able to open up as well. So that really helps to have some parallel mentors. But with the boss, to make the relationship more fruitful on both sides, I think the most important thing is transparency and genuineness, right? I do sit down people when, I feel that they're getting lost or they're not motivated, trying to understand what really happened. But at the same time, you really need to tell them, because it's not that at the end of the year, they want to know that what's happened or, you're shifting profiles from one to the other because you think that this is not right. So I think that, that friendship or that ability to just sit down and talk very genuinely, and keeping your door open for them to come back to you and say that, I have this problem, how do I solve it? I just need some time off, or I need to do something different. Or basically what I do, and which really works, is that with most of the senior team, I do a one coffee a month. I do sit down with them over a coffee in a non-office environment. And I encourage each of them to do that with their subordinates. They just open up at that point in time. You just call somebody and say, you're having any issues, they're not going to open up.
I love this. It shows true. The open door policy. You have to be an approachable boss, because otherwise people will be too scared. Then especially that the problem happens is when you're at the top of the food chain and there's so many layers. There might be someone who doesn't know that they can come to you with something.
Yeah.
But it's also important to show respect to their manager. So middle management. I've always said there's the only reason to come and cross that sort of that border is to see if there's something that you're not able to solve. And I think that the main thing is trying to encourage and foster an environment of teamwork, as opposed to who's better or trying to outshine each other. It's always that teamwork makes the dream work,
Makes
basically.
the dream
Yeah.
work. Maintaining authenticity, especially in the world of entertainment and in entertainment news, that is something that can be very challenging, because there is this feeling of okay, should we sensationalize the content?
Sure.
Because then it'll
Clickbait.
be clickbait.
Yeah.
Exactly. How does one deal with the challenges with that?
So I struggled with it at first, and I've actually unpacked this whole thing in my first book, To the Moon, How I Blogged My Way to Bollywood. But I realized very early on that the only way to keep it authentic and stay true to myself was to make a very simple rule. And you think it's kind of counterproductive to what we do as in the entertainment, or what they say is gossip news, but we're not really a gossip brand. My rule to my team was, you can only write what you can say to someone's face. Now, this really helps you really self-check on how much you'll sensationalize something, because you might joke around with someone, are you dating someone, or something cute, or something that you would joke around with someone in a nice, good-natured way.
Yeah.
But you will never cross the line just because we've been brought up that way. But I realized that what happened with the internet, or any place where you don't have to face the person that you're writing about, you get this, ability to say anything. And you even though I think of myself as a good person, I realize that the want and the greed for the social currency of likes and followers turns you into someone that you don't want to be. So this very simple rule of you can only write what you can say to someone's face has kept us authentic for 15 years. So it's kept our relationship solid. It's also kept our content fun and engaging, and it encouraged and sort of forced us in a sense to come up with new kinds of content that didn't require us to be clickbaity or demean someone behind their back.
Ratna, what do you think is a common misconception that people have about women entrepreneurs?
I think the common thing about the way they're perceived, right, is twofold. One is they're not in for the long haul, right? So generally when you're young, energetic, women want to start something off, get started off. But whether it'll grow into a large enterprise or a franchise or a brand, I think that, people need to start believing in. And second, they always feel more comfortable when, they have a male co-founder, right? Because then, they're trying to balance the yin and the yang and stuff like that. And we as investors, when we look at it, we see a lot of businesses getting funded, which are women-led, where there is a balance in the key management.
If you had to then collaborate on a startup venture with Miss Malini, not Malini Agarwal, or let's say Miss Malini, what do you think that could be?
Very interesting. So I think the best thing about any partnerships is that how you leverage each one's strength, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
So I've been an investor. She's been in the media. She understands it well. I think the best thing would be to accelerate businesses or create an incubator for, say, media businesses.
Yeah, it's a great idea. In fact, I do have a community of 100,000 women called Girl Tribe, and we encourage them with their small businesses. I recently heard this great definition. We all talk about hope, but hope can be kind of a frustrating thing because you tell people, go have hope. But how do they have hope? And, there is a new definition of it, HOPE, help one person every day. And if you look at it that way, and that's what we do. So I've started this thing called the Hope Hall, where I encourage young founders or startups to post about their businesses on Instagram under a post I put up. And every month I shop from 21 of them. And then I talk about the products I bought there. And I'm not asking for a collab. I don't want a freebie, but I actually shop from them just to create some awareness around them. And I think these are little things that we can do. And I would love to. We should really discuss it. I would love to create an incubator for the
it'd be
next
very
generation.
interesting.
And you know, what I love about them is that they're gutsy, they're resilient, and they're scrappy. So they don't waste a lot of money. These young women who are, you know, just doing stuff from out of their kitchen. And you know, if we encourage that many more women to join the workforce and become entrepreneurs, you'd actually double the economic strength of our country alone. So I'm in.
No, absolutely. I mean, on LinkedIn, I would be getting one invert a day asking for help, and we are trying to do something like this. Would you be able to help? Or, you know, what's been your experience? Can we talk? Normally, I would always respond to each of them and, you know, give some help or some connect. But it's not always possible to do it in an unstructured manner, right? Sometimes we hold conferences or webinars where ask me anything kind of a thing where people can come to, where people do come together and, you know, whatever is the business that they are doing or something, they can do it. I'm also part of a couple of women entrepreneurship networks where 2-3 women come together and they're really trying to coach and help women come into entrepreneurship. So, you know, I'm advisor to one or two of them. And that is also very interesting. Again, you know, you have meetings or you have cohorts where you kind of pick 5 of them and you train them in their journey.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting now is that today every young entrepreneur can be their own brand ambassador. That's what personality-led brands are about. And it doesn't mean that you have to be a supermodel or be a great actor, nothing like that. If you believe you're the one who knows your brand's DNA in and out. And I always encourage people that, you know, brands are built on good storytelling, and that's what people want to hear. So even when you craft your social media story, if you tell your real story of how you came up with your brand, it's going to be unique, it's going to be authentic, and it's going to connect with somebody.
One point I'll really add over here, because a lot of women entrepreneurs are going to watch this. 2 things which women really need to identify and start doing is, one, networking, and the second is storytelling. On both these things, women don't take the front foot in doing it. And therefore, a lot of these networks, there are a lot of women entrepreneurship networks, and, you know, happy to give some information regarding that, where just by knowing a few other people, it really helps you, it opens your mind, gives you more ideas. And the second is storytelling. They're not so good marketeers of themselves. And I think that really needs to change.
I think it comes honestly from like a generational thing where we don't like to talk about ourselves, or we're shy, and that imposter syndrome, and all of us sit with this. And actually, you know, Wendy Clark, who's like ex director of DDB, she said that, you know, we all have this little voice in our heads that is the imposter, that's insecure, that doesn't know, isn't sure what to say, and so then sits shy back. And she says you must think of that voice in your head as a roommate that you nurture and take care of. And when you leave the house, leave that voice at home, because don't let that define you, especially for women entrepreneurs. I say this because we've all felt it, is that, you know, you have to have confidence is key. And, you know, there are all these different variations of fake it till you make it, or just put your, you know, you have to do that. And if you push the confidence out, it gives other people the confidence in your brand as well.
It's the age of collaboration, and I feel like the two of you have absolutely touched upon that, because it's so important to find your tribe, collaborate as much as possible, and feed off each other as well, because a lot of times what I may be going through, you might be going through, and we might even find solutions to those problems. But for both of you, and I'll start with you, Ratna, who's been your strongest ally during your entire journey?
I think family support is very, very important, right? Whether it's your parents, your in-laws, your children, your husband, I think that understanding that, you know, you're going out there and putting yourself out, the support that you need from them, I think that's unparalleled. If you don't have that, whatever support you get externally, it will not matter. So I think that has been my biggest strength and my biggest ally.
I think for me, and very similar to you, is also like for me, so my CEO is my husband. I started the business. He went to Harvard Business School, came back. I think you're also alumni, right, as well. So he came back and was very supportive from the beginning. And ironically, in a country like India, your husband working in a company called Miss Malini, people would always like raise an eyebrow, but his Instagram bio literally says Mr. to Miss Malini, and I'm okay with that. He gets a lot of props for that. But I think aside from that, I think there have been so many different, allies and mentors along the way. There have been, people who've guided me, and I've learned this lesson from them that give unabashedly advice. Don't gatekeep advice, especially for women entrepreneurs. I know that we've been, fed on a diet of creating friction or distance between women. Women can't be friends, or women are always in competition. But Michelle Obama said it best. She said, when I went to hear her speak for like a Maybelline conference, and she said, "I'm so excited when I look at this audience of women, young women, influencers in front of me, that because you're tomorrow's leaders, teachers, mothers, sisters, is that you can lift each other up and you will not lose anything in the process." And there's a line I love that says, "You don't need to unscrew anybody else's light bulb to shine." And I think that's so brilliant. And I think that that's the best piece of advice. And influencers have done it so well: collaboration over competition. Because when you collaborate, you expose your brand to a larger audience that already likes what you are selling, and you increase both of your audiences and double it, as opposed to being in competition or tearing each other down. So I think for me, the allies along the way have been literally so many people. The ones who were, whether they were celebrities at an event before I was Miss Malini and I was just going and trying to get a little bite, who were kind to me for literally no reason at that point, or the support that I've had within the industry and within my team as well. But aside from that, it's literally also every single person who followed or became part of the community. I think that that's the biggest thing, right? The consumer, it takes 1,000 true fans to build a brand.
True.
There is this saying, right, that great women fix each other's crowns, right? But I think that why only women? Great leaders, great people should fix each other's crowns. And I think that ally is the best ally, because it'll always be appreciated and it'll always be a long term.
So this is something that I want to now ask both of you as well. What's that one major change that you would like to see? And you would like to see something that gets implemented across all sectors, where we can ensure that women have equitable opportunities?
I mean, I think there's a lot of opportunities now. I think the one thing that I personally, an agenda that I'm very, passionate about is a change at almost at a primary school level of education of online awareness of how to behave. Because we started a Ignore No More movement about, there's a lot of abuse and harassment online, and especially with the number of women and men and the access that people have in their DMs. We constantly tell young women to ignore it when someone is, in your DMs. But I'll give you an example. I have a real life use case. I remember being 14 years old, going to a matinee show, wearing a mustard salwar kameez with oily hair and glasses on the streets with my mom. And I describe this in great detail for this reason, is that on the streets in Delhi, 30 years ago, some guy just came and just put his hand on my chest. And my mom said, "Ignore it, don't make a scene." Today, we would never say that. We'd say, no, we'd slap the guy or stop him. But we're making the same mistake online by telling our kids, ignore it, it's just online, don't read it. But the point is, we need to create education and awareness, because we've thrown our entire next generation with a cell phone in their hands. They're living, working, breathing, doing their education. And in COVID, you saw literally everything online. We cannot tell people to ignore the harassment, because this is the society, this is the neighborhood, it's our virtual reality. So I think that we need to create a massive change in education and understanding, because we prepare everyone for everything in life. But even to drive a car, I have to get a license, but I can join the internet free for all. My second book is called Under the Influence, and it really unpacks this, is that there has to be proper education before you allow people access to the internet. And we have to stop the shame game, because, as young women, they're getting, pics in their DMs, and they're feeling ashamed, and they're not telling their parents, and this just escalates to a bad place. So I think the large change that has to happen is we need to stop, and at a primary school level, create online awareness for using the internet.
Yeah, a safer environment.
Yeah, I think safer environment is a very, very key thing. And one of the things which you said, that what across different sectors that you will want to see, which will empower women better, is at a seat at the table. And that seat at the table is so important, because at most times they're ignored, whether it is in school, whether it is for any position, whether it is sometimes at homes, right? I mean, India lives in the villages. Top 10 cities will only contribute this much, where we see all the glam and we believe that, India is doing great. But if we walk down to, say 300 kilometers outside of Mumbai, and you go and see what people are going through, or how they are living, or how women are treated over there, it's going to be very, very eye-opening. So I think when you say seat at the table, safety is a very important thing, right? Today, even in boardrooms, women don't feel safe, right? Um, because they might have to compromise on certain other things because they want something, which is not the right thing. So I think that in itself, just having a seat at the table to be able to speak with the confidence that you're safe in doing that, that's very important.
So then, Malini, what was that like for you, walking into a room and here you are, you're also trying to put yourself out there as a businesswoman.
Yeah.
And you're being asked a question where somebody wants to know, what are your plans about bringing a family together?
So the thing is, it was done a little more subtly, obviously, than that. But it was kind of in the sense that as a female entrepreneur, and also the key woman insurance in this case, because the brand was called Miss Malini, and I would always joke around saying that my business is my baby. And then there would be the follow-up about, well, what about family and what happens then kind of thing, and will it become Mrs. Malini? That the amount of times people have cracked the Mrs. Malini joke, like slow clap for you. But I think for me it was kind of funny, is because I didn't plan to have a family, but it wasn't because of the business. I think the problem is that the way that the workforce functions is that if someone is running or investing in a business, I can also see from their perspective, they're like, okay, well, if I invest in this business and then this entrepreneur goes off and focuses on family and leaves the business behind, what do I do? But that's the narrative that women have always been told, right? Like this whole, will you be able to balance work and family? I think it's changing now. I'm not going to say it's not changing, but that question does still come up. And I think this is where this comes to, and I had two male co-founders and they've been a great support. So maybe there is a balance there, and the irony is, I think if we lived in a world where men were the ones who got pregnant and had kids, I'm sure we would have a solution by now. But I don't know what your thoughts are on this from the other side of the table.
Yeah, is this one of the things that is actually stopping us from seeing more women entrepreneurs out there?
See, the journey of a woman is such that at some point in time get married, some of them decide to have kids. That adds on certain responsibility. The general belief is that when a woman becomes a mother, she's going to take a back seat, right? And
Or her priorities are changing.
priorities are changing. And if you historically see, why do we see that pyramid where there are few women on the top, is because, if you take statistics, that has happened, right? And therefore there is a mindset. So if somebody is asking a senior woman while a job interview, or considering somebody for a promotion, trying to think about it, yes, they do think about it. Is that changing? Slowly people are accepting it, that now the social ecosystem has also become strong. So even if women want to have a family and still be, heading something or doing new things, there is acceptability, and there are some examples. I'll give you an example. A few days back, I was at a networking event for women in investing. And one of the girls who used to work with me earlier, she came up to me and she said, I'm expecting, I'm going to be a mother. And, a lot of people have asked me to talk to you because you are one of the few people who still managed to survive over here. So, that thing, so even she thought about it, that am I going to be here for long because, I am doing this. So it's about few examples. It's about a little bit of mindset change. And it's about more acceptability.
I also think it's about creating that support ecosystem. For example, how come, if like when you take your maternity, and I realized this during the pandemic because I also had a lot of team members, had babies, but they could suddenly be on Zoom with camera off, breastfeeding while they're having a meeting, and they're completely capable of doing that. Yeah. But does the Indian work environment allow, breastfeeding mothers to have a space where they can do that in the office? So we also have to create the environment at the same time, have places where, suppose I don't have house help or don't have a nanny, do I have a creche in the office? So I think it's also about creating the environment, because if you create those opportunities, and you saw so many women re-enter the workforce and were able to work from home during the pandemic, wasn't the lack of the desire or the drive or the ability. It was just physically not possible to because they had to breastfeed. So it's also about, enabling, setting people up for success in that sense.
But I'll tell you, globally, the statistics during pandemic is that the percentage of women that have left the workforce during pandemic because they were not able to take the entire stress of the pandemic and managing children at home, homeschooling and all of that was phenomenal.
Yeah, but it's also because the onus falls on the women. If the husbands or the fathers were sharing the load equally, maybe it wouldn't be the case.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to play like a quick game with both of you. And Ratna, since I have you in my eye line right now, I'm going to start with you. So basically, we're going to finish the sentence. When I invest in a women-led startup, the first thing I look for is?
100% the same things that I would look for in a startup which is led by a man. Why would it be any different?
The most common misconception about venture capital is?
Very glittery.
If I had to choose between backing an innovative idea or a strong team, which one would I choose?
Hands down, strong team. Because they will find out innovative ideas.
Very nice. Malini, for you.
Yeah.
The most surprising thing that I've learned from building Miss Malini is?
That people are, amazing. People will consume non-gossip, positive content if you just give them the opportunity to.
The most rewarding part of my job is?
Is that I get to do this every day. I meet phenomenal people. I'm literally living the dream.
One trend in the startup ecosystem that you're seeing right now that is exciting you the most?
Is that just the sheer variety of startups? I mean, I've recently met like 5 women who started scrunchy businesses, So I think the fact that you can make anything a career today, I think it's phenomenal.
Anything that you've seen?
I think I love the innovation that is coming into startups. And now I love the focus of profitable growth. Just not growth at any cost.
The biggest myth about entrepreneurship that I've personally debunked is?
That when you're by yourself, it's a very enjoyable journey because you have to not report to anybody. But the responsibility that comes around it, you really need to walk that along with the joy of it.
Same question for you.
For me, that a personality-led brand has a shelf life. It doesn't. You can create a legacy that outlives you.
Nice. In 10 years, I believe that the Indian startup ecosystem will be?
A leader and not a follower. India's always been a follower, the back office of the world. I think that's dramatically changing.
And
I think we'll be very much AI enabled, and it's AI won't take your jobs. It's people who know how to use AI that will take your jobs.
like they say, there's already like 15 jobs that have been innovated that will be there 10 years from now.
Yeah, absolutely.
That we're sitting on today. Both of you, thank you so much.
Thank you.
For coming, joining, and I'm sure that you've inspired a lot of young women entrepreneurs out there.
Well, and I hope to continue our conversation. Maybe we can definitely do something together.
Great.
Thank you. You were such a great host. Thank you
Thank
for having
you,
us.
guys.
It's a fun conversation.
Absolutely.
Thanks.